Good evening and welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. We are live. Yes, we are still in COVID, but we have an amazing guest this evening. We have Dr. Saudia Twine. She is a life and marriage and relationship coach. She is the founder and host of Eros Meets Agape. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
And she is also a professor. She teaches. She is an author. She's written a couple of different books on relationships. And every once in a while, if you are lucky enough to see one of her relationship tips on social media, you are in for a treat. So this evening, we're going to talk about playing hurt while we're staying busy. So good evening, Dr. Saudia. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
I'm good. So let's get to it.
Okay.
We are in the midst of COVID, and I don't know about you, but 2020 has been just, whoo, it's been a year. And I have been hearing from lots and lots of couples, lots of people who are like, is this the person I married? Okay, so when 2020, when we get to the series finale, or the second half, can I swap my mate? Because this isn't working. I've heard that from quite a few people.
Oh,
I,
danger, Will
danger,
Robinson.
right. We're in the danger zone. I've also heard from people like, you know what? We gonna ride it out, but when this is over, I'm done. I can't do this. I'm getting a divorce. And it's sad because we know that a lot of issues that people had are now emphasized. Everything is out in the open and people are struggling. Before you could go to work, you could go to church, you had obligations, you had board meetings, community groups, kid activities. Not everybody is at home, including your kids with virtual school. And can I just say, oh my goodness, somebody say a prayer for me because it's rough. The struggle is
That's a
real.
lot.
So, with all of that being said, how do you, as a therapist, what would be one of the things that you would advise someone to do if they are dealing with pain and now because the thing that was sort of the buffer to that pain, which was staying busy, is no longer an option and now it's in front of their face, what would you advise someone to do to help salvage that relationship?
Okay. So you know me, I have to get technical.
Yes, please do.
Okay. So in counseling world, we call that triangulation.
Okay.
And in triangulation, you'll have two spouses, and let's just say one of them has this pain that you're identifying. The pain itself is in essence the third party in the relationship, which makes it the triangulation. So what happens when I don't want to deal with whatever's happening in my relationship, then I technically focus on the pain, or I focus on my kids, or I focus on my job, or whatever that third thing is. So it takes the pressure off of the relationship, and it just really distracts you to either massage whatever that thing is that's healthy or unhealthy. The issue with that, now that you have COVID and quarantine, I don't have that distraction anymore. So now I have to deal with what's happening. And in a relationship, you have to think of a marriage or long-term relationship like a rubber band. And we know that when there is pressure in a rubber band, it will expand. And then when that pressure is released, it will contract. Well, the relationship is the same way. When there are issues happening within life or the family or what have you, we will expand, which means we are supposed to expand with the pressure in the hopes of us accommodating one another and making the provisions that need to be made in order to get past this hurdle. Then when that hurdle is overcome, or that time passes, or that issue dissipates, then we contract to go back to our previous state. The issue when there is pain, and here's the caveat to that, it depends on what type of pain it is. Is it, a result of loss and grief? outside of this relationship that I need help with, and I need you really to be there and support me? Or is it, whether that loss is job or a family member, a loved one, friend, could be anything? Or is it a pain that is what we call an attachment injury in our relationship? And so now that injury is caused through the relationship by my spouse, and that really needs to be talked about in the relationship. But guess what? We sometimes have difficulty having those hard conversations. So depending on where that pain comes from will determine if we're able to expand in the way that we need to expand during times of trouble. And if you don't expand, all I can really honestly say, to give you the best example, is think of a pop bottle. When you shake that pop bottle or that can of pop, and then, all that pressure is coming from that carbonation, right? Mm-hmm. So then when you take that top off, all that pressure has to expand somewhere. So it just releases out. And that's what happens in our relationship. It will release out, which means that we will lash out on one another because I no longer have that distraction and all this pressure has been built up. So in order to really deal with the pain, you really have to sit down and talk to one another. But if you don't deal with the pain, then that means somewhere along the way, at some unexpected moment, at a most unopportune time, that pressure is going to release, and it's not going to be pretty.
And there are a lot of people right now who are going through pressure situations like that. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I'm in a wives group on Facebook, and I listen to some of the situations, and I often think about you. I'm like, ooh, that's an attachment issue from childhood. That's an issue, in your relationship. And there was a woman who talked this weekend, and she was saying, everybody's at home. I am managing virtual school. I am managing my work as a writer for a magazine. And she's like, I'm taking care of all our meals. I'm washing clothes. And my husband is just on his call. And then he'll get up and be like, whew, it was a long day. And she's like, really? And so she said, do you all ever have a time when you don't like your husband? And of course, everybody on there was like, girl, that's every day, but you love him.
Right. Exactly. Two different things.
Exactly. You still love him, but you have to talk it out. And some people were saying, you really need to sit down and have a conversation with your husband and explain to him all the things that you do. Hopefully he'll see it. If he doesn't, that's a whole different issue. Mm-hmm. I'm curious to know what would your thoughts be? And I know I sort of just tossed that to you.
Oh, that's okay. I love thinking extemporaneously. So in essence, I did this. I used to do these little video clips that I would post on social media, just different thoughts as far as relationships. And one of them was called, I love you and I like you too. And make a long story short, my nephew was like 3 or 4. He was so cute. And one time he just walked up to me and he said, Auntie Saudia, I love you. And I said, oh, baby, I love you too. And he said, and I like you too. Wow. And I said, okay, from the mouths of babes. And it just stuck with me that when we love someone, I'm going to transfer this to relationship with the example you had mentioned. When we love our spouse, we know that, there are certain elements that come with that. We are caring for them, supporting them, validating them, loving on them, among other things. Those are just the basic 3, right? Uh-huh. But when it comes to liking them, we sometimes think, I don't have to like you at certain moments. And in essence, I say we love them and we like them, but I might not like your behaviors. And because I don't like your behaviors, the only way you're really going to understand where I'm coming from is what you said, which is I need to sit down and talk with you. And so many couples right now are recognizing, we are juggling all these different hats that we didn't even know how to put on, basically. I don't know too many parents that are like, yeah, I had that side degree in teaching, right? So that's a challenge. Mm-hmm. Let alone you're at home, you're on your computer doing work, and then the kids are either close by, next to you, or another room doing their work. And don't let a little one come up with I can't find my pencil.
Yes.
And you're like, I'm on the world call,
Yes.
So it's a lot. But if you don't allow, your spouse to be more inclusive in these things, then they don't know. And we can't fault someone if they don't know. It's a difference when they do know and they're choosing not to be supportive, when they don't know and they just have no clue as to what's happening. And like you had mentioned, he pretty much came out from all his calls and that was it. But if we look at it from an attachment perspective, we always, as children, regardless if you're in a 2-parent home, there is that one parent that you make a beeline for. Yes. And in most cases, it's mom, because mom is known in our society, especially if you're a Christian family, you're known as being the nurturer, the caregiver. Mm-hmm. The one, and not saying that fathers aren't that, it's just that is the mother's domain, so to speak. And so because of that, the child just automatically makes that beeline. So I know many parents who look at me and say, they will pass up dad on the couch, come to me upstairs or in the basement, I'm folding clothes. What are we eating for dinner? I need such and such. And you're like, didn't you just pass your daddy on the couch? What's going on? Exactly. Like, yeah, whatever. So like I said, what are we having, right? And, mom instinct kicks in, you go right into it. So with regards to this young lady, it's really just a matter of helping in those shared duties, because in most cases, men just don't know. And I don't mean to make it sound as if they're not, smart or intelligent. It's just the fact that men and women have different structure in regards to our brain matter. The brain matter in a male compared to a female is compartmentalized. So that's why women will do 5 and 6 things at one time, multitasking. And he'll be like, I can't do all that. I can only do one thing at a time. Well, that's because of his brain matter. It's like, like you think of those old ice cube trays, each cube is in his own little compartment, and that's how men are. So, he's on his Zoom call. He's not trying to solely focus on that. One, he doesn't know all the things that you're juggling. And 2, he isn't as great at multitasking as you. And so because of that, guess what? You're going to expand because the pressure is coming. Someone needs your help and you're the one who's being called upon. But you can't sit down and really have a discussion at a time in which that is not the moment where that conversation is happening or needed, but you're just doing it on an easy breezy day. And you're like, hey, look, babe, this is what's happening. This is how I'm feeling. If your partner really cares for you and they hear how it's making you feel, then they'll respond. When they hear you just venting and all that, that doesn't move anyone to make any change. But when we share how we feel, not necessarily how we're thinking about it, then we're moved to help. And I would say to this young lady, share with your husband how you're feeling about all of this added pressure, and then ask, or should I say, put it in a nice little simple phrase, I need some help from you. And then if you can, be specific, because men just honestly don't know. Tell him what it is that you need. And if you tell him, someone who really loves and cares for you will do their best to make it happen. Now, it might be a project to make it happen every day, all day, but it's a process. He has to learn. So you have to be patient while he's juggling this new thing that he's been given.
Excellent. I knew you would have the answer. I should have called you on Saturday and said, hey, let me pick this up to you. So speaking of family dynamics, we talk a lot about, in our past episodes, we've talked a lot about parent-child relationships. And what happens in childhood often will follow you into adulthood relationships. And I always love to talk about this question. So you have people who have broken relationships with a parent. And I want to focus specifically at this moment on women, especially when we have a broken relationship with our father. We get married, we'll have an expectation something will happen, and it doesn't work. And we sort of fall back into the belief system that we had about our father, especially if someone told you, your father ain't no good. All men are dogs. They're no good. and you carry that, how would you advise a woman, or women generally speaking, to get over or to get past, to heal from something like that? And I know this is very general, but just a couple of different tips, because there are a lot of people that are hurting because they have lost a relationship with someone that was very important to them for whatever reason, and it is passed on into adulthood, and they are wreaking havoc everywhere they go.
Okay. A few little tweaks to that I'll have to address. So one is, so you have to ask ourselves, is it a result of that person was never in their life, or they were there and then fell off, or something happened and they were no longer there for whatever reason? If that person was never there, then there's always this absence. There's always this questioning, because as children, we get around other kids and we see, wait a minute, you have a dad? Oh, wait a minute. Okay, well, mom, why don't I? And then if mom isn't healed, or if I should say, if she doesn't have much emotional intelligence or knowledge, then she'll have adult conversations with a child.
Yes.
And, giving an example, if I may.
Yes, please.
My parents were divorced, and I talk about my people stuff all the time because they know how I am. They know I'm going to do it, and they've given me the approval, as opposed to me using a client, right?
Right.
So my parents were divorced, and I had no idea whatsoever when it came to divorce. When I defined it, and I wasn't until, I would say, in high school that I started listening to other people and was like, oh, that's not what divorce means. To me, divorce meant, oh, your father doesn't live with you anymore. But that was all. Everything else stayed the same. He still picked me up for school, brought me back home, and took me to practice and talked to me and did things with me. Nothing else changed. So I had no clue that my parents got divorced because my daddy cheated on my mom. Had no clue. Until I became an adult and my mother told me. Now, mind you, I had a stepmother, but I didn't ask where she came from. Mm-hmm. And all that to say, my mother didn't have an adult conversation with a child. Mm-hmm. So because of that, I didn't have that caveat. But because I came from a broken relationship, you still have these missing elements because that person is not in your household showing you on a daily basis how certain things should be handled and done. So when you have a parent who really does not communicate that, to not make this information more difficult than what it is, attachment is very dense. So it's really kind of hard to explain without confusing people if they've never heard it before. But in essence, it's either secure or insecure. If you grow up in a home that has two parents, then generally if those parents are healthy and they show you how to express and communicate love to the place where you're able to do so verbally and non-verbally in a healthy manner, you will develop secure attachment where you have a comfort with intimacy and being close, as well as having a comfort in being on your own and autonomous, okay? So if Boo says, I'm going to kick it with the boys for today, you don't feel rejected as a result of it, right? Or if you want to hang out, with the girls for a day or so on a girls' trip, you aren't having anxiety being away from Bay, okay? But if we have insecure attachment, then the opposite occurs. If Bay says that, he's hanging out with the boys, I'm wondering what's wrong with me. Mm-hmm. Why am I not good enough? And in most cases, when we have insecure attachment and we come from these broken homes, whereas parents were communicating to us erroneously, we generally hear the same message continuously. And as children, because we are made to be relational, our attachment style is gifted to us by our primary caregiver. In most cases, that's mom or the major person that raised you, so to speak. They gift you with your attachment style based on the relationship and how they interacted with you and how you saw that interaction. When it's insecure, it can come in a few forms. It can be avoidant, which means that I withdraw because I really don't know how to handle emotion, because we didn't do that in our house. We didn't express emotion. So therefore, when someone is sharing their emotions with me, if it's too much, I need you to cut that off and shut that down because I don't know how to respond appropriately. I know exactly what I'm thinking and what I want to say, but I don't trust that I can say that. So that looks like, if you all recall, being in high school or class in general, and the professor or teacher asks a question, you know the answer. You want to raise your hand, but you don't because you're afraid, what if I get it wrong? I'm going to be embarrassed, and I don't want to be embarrassed. That's what happens when we have avoidant attachment. I know what to say because I still feel I'm still gifted with that ability, but I don't know how to say that because I'm afraid I could make a mistake, and that would be worst of all. And that's because in childhood, you did that. You weren't responded to. You didn't like how it felt. So you taught yourself to shut off your emotions like a light switch. You can turn them on and turn them off. You're very in control of your feelings. Whereas when we're what we call anxious, we're a little bit more intense. And that intensity can be too much and overwhelming at times because it's very insatiable. You have to be attached to this other person. You feel rejected or abandoned when they aren't there. So when Bae wants to go kick it with their friends, you're like, what did I do wrong? You know, what's wrong with me? And all of those things boils down. And there's another one, but that's another topic for another day. But in essence, all of these messages really boil down to certain things. So I can talk with someone, and just by asking them a certain series of questions, I can immediately identify what their attachment style, which lets me know how they communicate in a relationship. And it boils down to, you either have a sense of rejection, abandonment, I don't matter, I don't come first, I'm small, invisible, broken. It's a few other things, but the concept is the same in regards to really just being able to place them in the category of either avoidant or anxious attachment. So when we are given the wrong message growing up, how we respond to that begins to categorize how we are going to see ourselves as well as how we see other people. And if I get that in childhood, our attachment really kind of lays dormant for a while, you know, hibernates like a bear, so to speak. And then you grow up, you have an adult relationship with someone, and that attachment becomes alive again. And your brain says, oh, wait a minute, we've been here before. We know how to do this. And it picks up where it left off in childhood, because in essence, you blindly practice it, whether you express love at home when you were a kid or you didn't, if that person was consistent or inconsistent. All of that, or should I say, all of those messages are kind of brought back to life. So now when I'm an adult and I'm in a relationship with someone, I believe that this person is not there for me or will not be there for me, or I believe I cannot trust this person. And those beliefs are accurate. They're 100% true because you experience them with your primary caregiver. However, it may not be 100% true with your partner. They're just poking the bear, so to speak. They're just kind of picking on that thing that was already sitting there. But because that is the person that is closest to you, that is also the person that makes you most vulnerable. And that is also the person that you feel as if you need to be able to be close to them and you want to, but for whatever reason, you're anxious because of it. And that anxiousness comes out, and like I said, either avoidant or anxious attachment. They're both anxious, but they're just titled differently. Mm-hmm. And how we choose to respond to someone is based off of that attachment style. So in answering that question in a long roundabout way, in essence, what's going to happen, you develop a certain set of beliefs. And honestly, the only way you can get out of that is to change how you see yourself and other people. And that's through what we call our internal working model. That's a lot of work, all right? Let me just not even lie, it's a lot of work. I grew up as loving as my father was. I grew up in a household where my mom, her mother died when she was 4, and that was traumatic. Therefore, her response to things was the other form of attachment style, which is called disorganized fearful. And she was not very emotional and expressive. So I developed avoidant attachment. Those are people who don't really express and show their emotions. It takes a lot of work and daily effort to change your attachment style. It's possible. It's not impossible. It's definitely doable. And when you do the work, you can move from what we call, from avoidant to what we call earned secure attachment. You will never, ever be strictly secure simply because you have a history of insecure. But you can definitely become earned secure. And literally, it's as if you didn't have that history. Your mind will try to go back to those memories, but you're like, those aren't real. That's not true. And you can just bypass them. So it really just takes a person to take the effort in asking the questions that are really happening internally. What am I feeling? What am I thinking? Is this happening in this moment? Or can I attribute this to a previous issue, experience, conversation, or situation with my primary caregiver? Or it could be from a previous partner, because that can also happen too. You can switch attachment styles based off of a previous partner, sort of like Darwinianism, survival of the fittest. If you were in a previous relationship and you had to pretty much succumb to the other person's attachment style to make it work, then your style can also change, either positively or negatively.
Wow. So I
That's
want
a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot to break down.
but that was so helpful. So I want to talk a little bit about the last point that you made. There are lots of women who have had bad relationships and now are in a new relationship and specifically will say, I don't matter in this relationship. Probably because of insecurities that happened when they were children, or they put up with a lot of things that were against their beliefs, or were things that they were not positive for them to participate in terms of partnerships. So if you have a boyfriend or a spouse who's always working, or who's always hanging with his boys, or is always on his PlayStation or Xbox, you'll have some women who'll feel like, okay, I don't matter because this person is always occupied. And it takes them, as you said, right back to childhood, where they go, I know what this feels like. What would you advise a woman to do when she's feeling like that? And I know we've talked a lot about therapy, we've talked a lot about talking. Is that it? Are there other things that they should do? Or what's the first step?
Well, in all honesty, most cases, unless someone has actually been to therapy before, they will never be able to pinpoint it goes back to childhood. The mind just doesn't work like that. So once I know something, I can't unknow it. So
Right.
most people don't know that. And they have to become aware of it. In most cases, what we're seeing, it's what I like to call, I mean, it's technically a lie, even though it's the truth. It's a lie because our what we call cognitive beliefs, automatic thoughts, they're actually true because they're repeating what happened in childhood. But it's a lie because we have all this information. If we look at a sifter, when we put flour in a sifter, you know, the sifter is going to get out, or, you know, make purify, so to speak, you know, that flour, so that not all of it is really coming through, or it's coming through very fine, but some of it is going to be left in a sifter where some of it comes out. Or if we look at a strainer or a colander, right? Same concept. Some of the things are going to come out where some is going to be left in. What happens is the information that's coming through to them, I like to call it how we it's the acronym PER, how you perceive, evaluate, and respond to the close experiences in your relationship. So to make a long story short, the best answer that I can give without someone having help would be to ask yourself, one, is this really what's happening? More than likely, they're going to say yes, because they believe that it is. The second thing is, what is a possible alternative outcome? Because I am perceiving this conversation this way, that I don't matter, I don't come first, okay? Or I'm insignificant. Whatever that thought is, you believe it to be true. But that's how you're perceiving that conversation. Is that how that person intended for that information to be understood? So you have to slow down a conversation and really just check in. Babe, wait a minute. I think I just heard you say, and then you complete that sentence or whatever. And I'm hearing that as, in all honesty, and this is the difficult part, we don't like to be vulnerable. We don't like to be naked, right? You know, we'll take off our clothes to somebody, but really be emotionally naked. I don't want to do that, because that puts me in a position where I am so exposed that I don't know if you're going to receive me by looking at me in this vulnerable state. And it takes a really strong person to be comfortable in discomfort. And it's very uncomfortable to be able to say, wait a minute, what did you just say? Because I'm feeling as if, you know, I don't matter to you. That's really hard to say. So if someone can't have that conversation, understandable, nothing is wrong with them, you're not abnormal, you are completely on point normal based off of the history that you have. The one thing that you could do would be to say in your own head, what is another possible alternative way of seeing this? Okay, because how you are perceiving the conversation may not be how it was actually intended or actually communicated. How you're evaluating this information is 100% based on your experience from your attachment style from or belief from childhood. Okay, so your style is just the ID. It's like your dog tag, so to speak. The belief is I don't matter, I don't come first. And that's how you're evaluating that information. And then you're choosing to respond based off of how you perceived and evaluated it. So before you respond, ask yourself, is there another way that he possibly could have meant this? It doesn't have to be right. It just means that you're considering alternatives. And if you practice that long enough, eventually you'll begin to believe there has to be an alternative other than my answer being the only answer that exists. And that will eventually prompt you to see things differently. We call that partner influence. And I'm trying not to download you all with so much information, but it's just hard because they all connect together. But in essence, just ask, what is another alternative possible outcome? And over time, you'll begin to see things a little bit differently because you won't automatically attribute bae with negativity. And I always say bae just because I don't know if people are married in a significant relationship, but nowadays we've broken down baby to bae. So everybody has bae. So that's safe. I'm not disrespecting Mr. and Mrs., but at the same time, not giving titles to people who don't have a spouse title.
Exactly. I know it's a tricky new world that we're in. Definitely. So now we've talked a lot about women and our time is going quickly, but I wanted to get in a question for men. So men seem to be having a moment where they're communicating, they're talking, and I think it really is because everyone is at home and everything is out in the open. So people are having interesting conversations. What advice would you give to men to help uplift and to be there for one another? Because women, we do it really well. You know, you can call your girlfriends, y'all can get together for dinner, tea, whatever, on the phone, and you can talk and say, girl, let me tell you what he did. And they listen and give you advice and, you know, all this and that. Men don't necessarily do that, but it seems like to me, maybe there's a trend starting where men are starting to express themselves a little more.
I think men are just different in the aspect we share through conversation, they share through experience.
Mm-hmm.
And if there isn't an opportunity for them to get together, whether it is, you know, I don't know what they call it because I'm not a gamer, but if they're on video games and they're talking to one another there, or if they're, you know, playing basketball or whatever group they're in. But, you know, people are becoming more aware of their emotions and building their emotional intelligence. So there are a lot of, I won't say a lot, but there are a number of men's groups, especially on Facebook, that really allow them to really kind of talk and share. And they really kind of started, or should I say developed, out of men just being single dads and like, hey, what are you all dealing with? Because this is what I'm working with. And I have a little girl and, you know, maybe mom isn't around or what have you, whatever that is. They're able to have these conversations. The thing is, they can have those types of conversations in such groups simply because they have people who understand, who get it, but they also feel that it's a safe space. So if you are a male and you are in a relationship with someone, or you have strong friendships, the key is having a safe place to be able to share. Men are mostly avoidant, which means they aren't accustomed or prone to sharing their emotions. And when they do, they have to believe it's a safe space to do so. So one, you need to have that person that you can talk to. Again, if it's not your spouse or a best friend or a safe group where you all are all sharing such information, then you definitely want to make certain that you're able to find that type of space, and then to make certain that that space is safe in your eyes, meaning whereas you feel that you can communicate Even if it's not with great detail, you can communicate to begin to garner that trust so that it can build, so then you can share.
Excellent. Excellent. So, here at the Kim B. Davis Show, we're all about being healthy and healing, and mental health is everything. And so, if your relationship is not working, everything else in your life will suffer. That is something that I personally believe in. Thank you, Dr. Saudia Twine, for coming on today. Please tell us how we can reach you and tell us where we can find your podcast.
Okay, so I have something fun coming up.
Yeah.
So I have a couples closeness checkup that's coming up soon. It's actually Sunday, October the 18th. And that's going to be 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Whereas, you know how you go get a physical exam? Well, the same thing needs to be done for a relationship. You really need to assess your relationship health. So I'm going to have a Zoom workshop, and that workshop is really just going to cover a couples checkup, just so you can get a chance to really see where you are in your relationship when it comes to conflict, when it comes to intimacy, and where it comes to closeness. So you're just going to check in, see how you're doing. I'll give you some tools and send you some information. So if you sign up, you'll get that in advance. So when I go over some things in the checkup, so to speak, then you'll have a bird's eye view in regards to your own relationship. And then I'll give some suggestions based on the categories and how to move forward if you're stuck or if you're rocking in that area, how to make it blossom even more. So anybody who wants to sign up for the couples closeness checkup, they can go to bit.ly, which is bit.ly/couples closeness checkup. And then anybody who really signs up for that, because I talk about attachment all the time, attachment is going to be a part of anything that I do. So it would be helpful if people understood their attachment style. So to answer 2 questions in one, you can catch my podcast on erosmeetsagape.com. And then also when you click on that, you can take a relationship quiz that will help you to be able to identify how you love, and also have a workbook that comes along with that. So in case, you're noticing any insecure attachment based off of those results, then I provide it's pretty detailed. It's like a 20, I think it's 20-page workbook that helps you kind of walk through different thoughts and experiences to really kind of help yourself really begin the process towards healing. So any of those 2 things you can find me on anytime, but definitely on the 18th of October, I am having that couples closeness checkup, and anybody can sign up for that. And I would love to see anyone there. The more the merrier.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Saudia Twine. We'll definitely be checking that out.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed this talk.
I know. We have to have you come back because, we got to continue this conversation about attachment. Anytime. One of the things that I tell my girlfriends, I'm doing my darndest to try to make sure that my 2 sons are healthy so that their wives will be like, thank you, Miss Davis.
That's right. That's right. Like, you made our lives so much easier.
Because, the struggle, the stories that I read, boy, oh boy, the struggle is real. Mm-hmm. So again, thank you, Dr. Saudia Twine. I am sure we will be having you back on soon. As always, thank you for watching the Kim B. Davis Show. We hope to see you on our next episode. And as always, remember, be magnificent.